The left in America wants to personalize, polarize, and demonize American gun owners and conservatives. This is part of their plot, their strategy, which I write about in First They Came for the Gun Owners. This notion of how really anti-American leftists want to treat gun-owning Americans, and all conservatives for that matter, shines through yet again just this week as former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton came out and said that many of us who voted for President Trump in the past need to be deprogrammed, formally deprogrammed. Let's talk about what this means and how this ties in to our right to keep and bear arms. Stay tuned. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gunner, constitutional attorney, member of the U.S. Supreme Court Bar, and author of First They Came for the Gun Owners, the A to Z guide of how the anti-gunners intend to take away our guns. All right, folks. So this week, Hillary Clinton is in the news again, and it touches fingers with guns. Although she wasn't specifically talking about guns, I can assure you she had in mind all American gun owners. For those of you who missed the story, Hillary Clinton basically exposed her internal view that totalitarianism is good by basically saying that many people, those who support Donald Trump, need to get out of the cult and need to be deprogrammed, formally deprogrammed. That specifically, Hillary Clinton says about the extremists in the Republican Party, which are those that support Make America Great Again. And of course, many of those support the Second Amendment's right to keep and bear arms as part of America's Bill of Rights and constitutional history, constitutional tradition. This is what Hillary Clinton says about so many of us. And sadly, so many of those extremists, which I can tell you anybody that owns a gun will be viewed as an extremist by Hillary Clinton. And sadly, so many of those extremists, those MAGA extremists, take their marching orders from Donald Trump, who has no credibility left by any measure. He's only in it for himself. She continues on and says, and when do they break with Donald Trump? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something needs to happen. Now, whether you think Donald Trump is good or bad or indifferent, it doesn't matter. The point is that here you have a prominent figure in the Democratic Party is talking about formally deprogramming, which basically means we're going to put you on a train and ship you off to a re-education camp the same way they do in China or North Korea. That's right. That's their plan. Now, I'd like to say that this is a one-off statement by Hillary Clinton and members of the Democratic Party and the leftists in America, but it's not, because I talk about this exact situation, exactly what I anticipated happening about American gun owners in my book, First They Came for the Gun Owners. Specifically, I talk in great detail in Chapter 2 about how what they tried to do with gun owners is, of course, to personalize us, polarize us, and demonize us based on the views of Saul Alinsky, which I'm not going to get into that in this video. What I am going to get into is some really shocking quotes here that are consistent really with what Hillary Clinton said. And again, it really does teach us, because it's very important when your enemy says, you know, death to America, right? Well, I used to talk about that in the Middle East. When you hear that in the Middle East, you got to take them at their word. So when you have a prominent leader of the Democratic Party saying they want to deprogram so many of us, and I can absolutely assure you, one of the worst things they hate about Donald Trump is his support of the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, and his appointment to the Supreme Court of Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Kavanaugh, and Justice Gorsuch, which gave us a 6-3 victory in NYSERPA versus Bruin. And again, no one is perfect, nothing is perfect, but boy, that is a great deal difference than what would have happened if Hillary Clinton had become president in 2016 and got to replace Justice Scalia with, instead of Neil Gorsuch, some other, leftist judge that's results-oriented, and the Second Amendment situation would be far worse off today than it is right now, which is actually not so bad. Nevertheless, I do want to put into context a couple other statements that were made, which is really shocking. I think it's shocking. First of all, it seems to me that the left has no interest in protecting minority rights. And what I mean by that is whenever you hear them talk about democracy dies in darkness, democracy, what they're really saying is we want to live in a world where the 5 largest cities in the United States, DC, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York City, get to vote for everything, and they get to lead the rest of us. And basically the movie The Hunger Games becomes a documentary where you have a capital city basically telling the rest of us Americans that we are tributes, serfs, slaves, if you will, to Capital City and the people that are friendly with Capital City. Now, I don't think that's hyperbole because, again, they have no interest in protecting minority rights. And that was the whole point of the Constitution. That's why we have all these checks and balances, whether it be federalism, separation of powers, different branches, whatever it is, staggered election terms, and so on and so on. It's about making sure that even though the consensus prevails in respect to public policy matters, there are certain things that are simply off the table and cannot be taken away by government, whether it be judges, Congress, or otherwise. And one of those critical things that cannot be taken off the table and taken away from individual Americans is the right to keep and bear arms, which gives us the right to defend ourselves against all forms of tyranny, whether it be foreign invasion, tyrannical government, animal attacks, the common criminal, national disasters, whatever it is. The point is that right to keep and bear arms allows us to defend ourselves without having to depend upon the government largest to protect us. Because as you know, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And that's especially true if the police don't like you and conveniently find an excuse to go slow. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but certainly in a world envisioned by the left, if you don't toe the ideological line, I am sure that you will be cut off from many good things, whether it be credit card access, whether it be banking access, or also law enforcement. So it's a perfect world for the left where you are disarmed, and the only way you can stay alive and be, protect yourself is if you go mother may I to the government and they protect you. And if you don't toe the line, the government will not protect you. It's the perfect double whammy. They take away your guns, they make you defenseless, and then they refuse to defend you against the scum that they're releasing from prison. And it's a perfect situation where you are toasty-mosty. And that is the world in which many on the left would like to see. That's my thought. Let me give you a couple other quotes that I think you'll find interesting. So one of the things I write about is a fascinating quote here by one of the most important legal scholars in the United States. He's a professor at the Harvard Law School named Mark Tushnet. Now, Mark Tushnet, in the summer of 2016, when he thought that the Democrats were going to take complete control and Hillary Clinton was going to become the president, he wrote this in May of 2016, again, operating on the assumption that Hillary Clinton was going to be president. I think you'll find what he writes quite shocking, because what he basically is saying, as I interpret it, is that he wants to treat conservatives, and I 100% do not kid yourself, one of the groups of conservatives or right-leaning Americans, whatever you want to call them, American heritagists or whatever, that they hate the most, 100% hate the most, are gun owners. They hate the fact that gun owners want to be independent, that we're self-reliant. They hate this. We're like the worst constituents for the left in America. So when you listen to this quote from Mark Tushnet from the Harvard Law School, a prominent legal scholar, keep that in mind as he talks about how he thinks that he wants to treat the cultural losers of cultural wars the same way that Americans previously treated the Nazis after World War II, the defeated Japanese after World War II, and the South after the Civil War. Listen to this quote from Mark Tushnet. He says, quote, "The cultural wars are over." Remember, this is 2016, in the summer, when it looked like Hillary might win the White House and not Donald Trump. Quote, "The culture wars are over. They lost, we won." For liberals, the question now is how to deal with the losers. Not my word, his word. For liberals, the question now is how to deal with the losers in the cultural wars. That's mostly a question of tactics. My own judgment is that taking a hard line, you lost, you live with it, is better than trying to accommodate the losers who, remember, defended and are defending positions that liberals regard as having no normative pull at all. Trying to be nice to the losers did not work well after the Civil War, nor after Brown versus Board of Education. And taking a hard line seemed to work reasonably well in Germany and Japan after 1945, period, close quote. Mark Tushnet, Harvard Law School, said exactly that, talking about conservatives in anticipation of the cultural wars being over. Now, I can 100% guarantee you that although abortion would be one cultural war that he's contemplating and referencing here, certainly guns is the other major cultural war because, again, I would say of all the different aspects of the conservative movement over the last 20 years, the thing that has been the most successful, the thing that we've actually made strides on and won on is the right to keep and bear arms. I would say most other aspects of the cultural conservative movements have gone either neutral or gone backwards and lost or been losing, but not the right to keep and bear arms. And I'm sure they're very upset by that. But basically, you have a prominent liberal at Harvard Law School talking about treating cultural conservatives that he thought was going to lose everything in 2016 as the equivalent of the losers of World War II and how they were treated by the Allied forces. Quite shocking if you think about it, to talk about fellow citizens like you and I, because we're his fellow citizens, right? We're fellow Americans, treating us as if we lost some sort of a war and we should just suck it up and our rights should not be respected in the same way as perhaps the left. That's how I interpret what he's saying. But let's continue on with some other craziness that goes along the line of what Hillary Clinton said today, saying that we should be formally deprogrammed, which is really, as I see it, a euphemism for we should be put on trains, driven out somewhere and taught to toe the liberal line, which includes guns are bad, assault weapons are true, ghost guns is a real thing, gun violence is a real thing, and so on and so on. But we're not going to. That's not going to happen to us. That's not going to happen to us no matter what. Okay? But let's move on. So the other interesting thing that I talk about that's consistent with this is, believe it or not, and how many of you know this, there's a professor named D. Watkins that actually says that in his view, this is what he fantasized about, that you need to force Americans who want to carry a firearm to ready for this to be shot first. That's what the Professor D. Watkins said, that if you want to carry a gun, he thinks, at least he fantasizes, that you should be shot first. So you know what it feels like. This is his quote. Ready? Professor D. Watkins, a professor. Quote, I believe that being shot would be a requirement for gun ownership in America. Let me read that again so you didn't miss it. Quote, I believe that being shot should be a requirement for gun ownership in America. It's really quite simple. You need to have a gun like taking selfies with pistols. Can't live without it. Then take a bullet and you will be granted the right to purchase the firearm of your choice. So if you love guns, if they made you feel safe or make you feel safe, if you hold and cuddle with them at night, then you need to be shot. You need to feel a bullet rip through your flesh. And if you survive and enjoy the feeling, then the right to bear arms will be all yours. Period, close quote. Professor D. Watkins. That's right. So the point I'm making here today, folks, is when we fight for our right to keep and bear arms, we're not just fighting for our right to keep and bear arms. We are fighting for our individual American freedoms that our forefathers fought for over 200 years ago and many times since then. So don't kid yourself. If we lose our right to keep and bear arms and we are disarmed, these are the sorts of people that will take over the country and will dictate policy for all of us. And when they look to you and me as fellow Americans, they're not going to look to us as fellow equal citizens. As I see it, in my opinion, they're going to look to us as subjects, subservient to themselves and to their political and ideological views. And I don't intend for us to be in that situation. And that's why I work so hard here at the Four Boxes Diner to educate you and to hopefully force multiply you out there in all of your communities to do good work, to protect all of our rights, including, of course, the most fundamental right, which is the right to life and the right to protect that life, which is the right to keep and bear arms. All right? All right, folks. Well, hope you learned a little bit something here today about some history and some recent conversations and discussions that have been going on. I'll put links to these citations in the descriptions down below if you want to check them out. And again, don't forget to subscribe to the Four Boxes Diner YouTube channel here. And again, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Four Boxes Diner. And we'll see you again soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.